Welcome to Deep Impact Investing with Kimberly Griego-Kiel from Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. In this podcast, we talk about sustainable investing and how your portfolio reflects your values. Do your investments seek accountability from corporations that govern more and more of our society and even the lives we lead? Listen in as we explore the question, are you investing like you give a damn?
Hello and welcome to Deep Impact Investing with Kimberly Griego-Kiel from Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. Good afternoon, Kim. How are you?
I'm good, Eric. How are you?
I am fantastic. And I will share with the audience, Kim is giddy. I think I'll use giddy.
I am giddy.
This podcast is going to be fantastic. And the only thing she would tell me is that she has a surprise for me. And I don't know what that is.
I have
Did you get your donkey?
surprises for you. No, I don't have the donkey yet.
Okay,
I've
just
been
checking.
busy.
Okay, I thought maybe that was a surprise.
No. I have surprises for you because I know how you love statistics.
Oh, I do.
And so I am all geeked out with statistics. And usually I send you all that stuff ahead of time, but I didn't this time.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm going in blind, but you did give me the title. Do you want to say it or can I?
You can.
Okay. Consumption Dynamics and the Pollution Solution. I just love that.
I know. Doesn't that just roll off the tip of your tongue?
Absolutely. It rhymes fantastically. And, or I'm going to do that again. It rhymes beautifully and I love it.
Yes. I went down so many rabbit holes researching this. I had such a great time.
All right.
Stayed up way too late. So
I bet.
let's get on it.
Yeah,
I have so much
and
to
I will
say.
say that the pollution solution is pretty straightforward to me. I mean, there's a lot, obviously, just because of the part of the title, that makes sense to me. But consumption dynamics isn't something that I've really heard about before, honestly.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
what is it?
That's a good question. I hope you know.
Yeah. I have some thoughts around it, and I want to talk about that. So
All right.
we know there's a pollution crisis. We've known that for a long time. We have a major climate crisis. We know that. We
Yep.
know also that there's an increase in consumer goods that are labeled sustainable or organic. If we look around and we compare that to even just a few years ago, we can see that there's this huge number now of products that are labeled green or sustainable or organic or free range. I mean, there's any number of items that are now have those labels. So who's driving that? It's the consumers, right?
I would hope so, yeah.
Yeah, and people want that, and they wouldn't be around if people weren't demanding it or wanting it or buying it. So it's a what we would call the dynamic around consumerism. People want that. They're looking for it. They're buying it. And so corporations are providing it for them.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense because, again, what the people want is what you want to produce. So
Exactly.
if there's some accountability there, then, or pressure, if you will, by the public, I think that's obviously what drives that market.
Right. So it starts with the consumer, then it's the producer or the corporations. And also there are certainly government actions around that as well, because if something's labeled organic, it has to meet specific requirements for that. Yeah. So, and as I mentioned, we both kind of love statistics, so I have some.
All right.
And like I said, I'm very full of them today. So I'm going to start off with that, with some statistics around that. And early in the 2010s, if we look at early in the 2010s, the S&P 500, which is, as we tell our clients, a broad market index. People always talk about that in the nightly news, like the Dow did this or the S&P did that. But the S&P is the broad market index, mostly large cap U.S. stocks. So the S&P had about 20% of those companies disclosing any kind of ESG data. 20%.
Yeah,
Not very many.
Not a big number.
Nope. But by the end of that decade, really the last 2 years, around 85% of those companies are disclosing some kind of ESG data.
That's a huge
So
change.
it's a huge change. So in a 10-year period of time, we've seen a big jump. And you're wondering, well, how's that related to consumer dynamics? It's related because, again, there's a demand in knowing what companies are doing on environmental, social, and governance issues. Because people want to know. It's all related to what we're doing.
Yeah.
So this dynamic around consumerism is a huge shift to sustainable products and the increasing demand that we're seeing, not just in the US, but globally. So my question for you is, if we broke it down into age groups, who do you think has the highest demand? If we look at Generation Z, which is our youngest age group, up to age 20, excluding babies, of course, they don't buy. So teenagers, really. Millennials, Gen X, which is me. I'm a Gen Xer. Baby boomers. And then I don't know where this term came from. I'd never heard it before, but that silent generation, which is our oldest generation.
Oh, I didn't know they're called the silent generation either.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. I mean, often I've heard it referred to as the greatest generation, but if we break it down into those 5 age groups, who do you think is driving this the most? Who would you guess?
Oh, well, I'd like to say Gen X because I'm in there with you.
Yeah.
I'd like to say it's us, but I'm wondering if it's the millennials.
You're right. It is the millennials.
Way to go, millennials.
Yeah. I don't know why there's been so much disparaging of the millennial age group, because they really are driving it. So millennials and Gen Z are the 2 highest groups, percentage-wise, that are driving this move towards sustainability. So this is a study that I found from 2017, done by Nielsen. We've heard of Nielsen.
Oh, yes.
You know, the TV rating. So they did this study. Gen Z is around 80% in terms of their desire for sustainable products. Millennials, 85%. Then we have Gen X, which drops down to 79%.
Okay.
Yeah, still pretty good, still high. Yeah, it's still a pretty high percentage. And then baby boomers, who we all thought were the generation that were changing everything in terms of the hippie generation and all of that, right? 72%. It's a pretty big drop. And then the silent generation, 65%, which is a huge drop.
They should speak up.
They should speak up. That silent generation, yes. Yeah. So I find that really interesting in terms of this. That in this study that was done by Nielsen, it was a global study, and of course it's a pretty good sampling size. But 81% of global respondents still felt strongly that companies should improve the environment, and that's going to be very important when we talk about some statistics later, because 81% is a pretty big percentage overall.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know if that surprises me or doesn't surprise me. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that statistic specifically, because it's interesting.
I think it's going to surprise you when
All
we
right.
start talking about the global community.
Okay.
If we talk about who the most enthusiastic for company-driven environmentalism is, this is where it gets interesting as we move beyond and that 81% statistic. Who do you think, if we look at this in a global perspective? And again, this is where this surprise piece comes in that I promised you.
You said global. Are we talking about age groups again?
Nope. Global economy, global consumer dynamics.
Well, Kim, you know that I would love to say it's the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
But you and I have spoken many times on this podcast that there are things in the U.S. that drive decisions, and whether it's money or whatever, I think there's too much greed within the United States. Personally, I think it's going to be we're probably going to be looking at Europe someplace.
That's what we would think, Europe, because they've always been very progressive,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not.
Really?
It's emerging market consumers.
All right.
Shocking, isn't it?
Yep.
We think that's very shocking. I was fascinated when I read this. And I did so much research when I first read this. I thought, why? Why is this? And the reason, many reasons actually, is because they're dealing with environmental hazards every day in their lives. And they're really searching for solutions. So it's really not a surprise, because we're thinking about water pollution,
Mm-hmm.
air pollution, food sources, better food sources, the production. I mean, emerging markets, China, India, they're major sources of production for so many products in already industrialized countries, U.S., Europe. So they're dealing with all of the after effects of all of those pieces. It's just a fascinating piece of this whole puzzle.
Yeah,
So we're going to talk.
Honestly, I wouldn't have thought that, and maybe I'm a little biased, but I mean, you mentioned China, and that surprises me mainly because of, and this is, maybe I'll just say this out loud. It's my opinion, but I think a lot of people would agree with me that the quality of product coming from China over the last couple decades has not been great, as far as sustainability of the product itself, right?
Right.
So much, and I guess this is my own soapbox, but I have so many issues with poorly made products that break very easily and quickly, which end up in landfills. And so therefore, I think that's an environmental hazard that I think businesses need to be held accountable for as well. Are you making a disposable product, even though it's supposed to last a lot longer than it did, because there's nowhere else for it to go, right? Besides trying to recycle something. But
Right. And I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. But they're producing products that the U.S. is demanding. They're not
absolutely.
producing products.
I'm not saying they're totally to blame.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But they're not producing those products for themselves. China, for example, is the world's biggest energy consumer because of this production line,
Mm-hmm.
which is a significant pollution challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So when that comes down to air quality. And they also, on top of that, now have big sustainability initiatives from curbing coal-fired power plants to investing in green technology.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, in 2016, only 10% of Chinese companies had any kind of corporate social and environmental initiative. According to a sustainability consulting firm called Sintao. I don't even know if I pronounced that right. And 1 year later, there was a Bloomberg data study that showed the ESG reporting within Chinese corporations that showed there was a big upside, gaining 33% reporting and outperforming the companies in the Hang Seng Chinese Enterprise Index.
Oh, that's a big jump.
So, yes, it is a big jump. During this same time period, Chinese consumer confidence and their willingness to spend on eco-minded, eco-friendly products grew. Around 41% of Chinese consumers say that they were willing to spend money on eco-friendly products. So it's a newer mindset for them. And also we're talking about a strong middle class growing in China, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that, because we could sure use that here.
Yes, we could. And India is the same way. So there's a huge pollution problem, a huge problem with water, a huge problem with same types of situations in India. They don't have the same type of middle class happening there, but they're looking for solutions for for all of these issues and moving towards more sustainable products within their country and within their own purchasing power. So it's not about the products that they're shipping out of country. It's about the things that their consumers are buying.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's a very fascinating piece of this whole puzzle. And so the global perspective is changing. And it's not always just about Europe and the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to see that. I mean, that's, like you said, it was very surprising to me. And that basically it tells the U.S. and Europe that we have a lot of catching up to do with attitudes.
Exactly. So part of this other Nielsen study showed that the enthusiasm for company-driven environmentalism is very, very strong. In India, 90% of the corporate respondents, so it's not 90% of companies, but the companies that responded to the study questionnaire, said that they were extremely, or it was very important that the companies implemented programs to improve the environment in terms of what they were doing internally for their production. So they might be producing a poor product that was being shipped overseas, as you said, the Chinese products or even Indian products, but they wanted internal corporate responsibility in terms of waste, energy usage, because it affected their country.
Yes. Yeah. And so let me ask you this, because what this brings to mind is that the United States went through its industrial revolution, right?
Yes.
Where we were creating products. There was a lot of pride in Made in USA, and just that entire time frame, we were cranking stuff out, right?
Yes.
However, we didn't have the mindset. We didn't have the global spotlight on anything environmental at that point. And does it seem to you now that China and India are kind of going through their own industrial revolution where they are producing the increase in production of products is likened to our industrial revolution, but because the environmental stage has been set for the last 2 decades or so, in my opinion, it's just on the forefront, and so they're doing it the right way?
That's exactly what it is.
I think that's got to be.
Exactly what it is. Yeah.
Right?
And I wouldn't say they're doing it the right way. They've been doing it the wrong way, but they're moving faster into the right way than we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a gentleman named Regan Leggett, who is the executive director of Thought Leadership and Foresight. And he said recently, within the last couple of years, talking about these emerging market countries who are facing rapid urbanization and a growing disparity between classes, that many people in emerging markets are experiencing a harsh reality of pollution in this postmodern industrial age, which is what you were just talking about. As a result, sustainability has become an urgent opportunity for companies to connect with consumers who are excited about change, which is exactly what you just said.
Wow. So let me ask you this. I don't know if it's on your report, but how does Mexico play into this? How are they doing?
Very similarly. The source of this is the Conference Board Global Consumer Confidence Survey. Again, this is in collaboration with the Nielsen study. So emerging market countries ranked the top 5, interestingly enough: Colombia, Mexico, Indonesia, Philippines, and Brazil.
Wow.
So China and India are not even in the top 5. And these are the countries, I keep saying companies, these are the countries that are emerging market countries that are pushing sustainability the most.
I'd like to be in the top 5. I'd like to be in the top 10. I don't even want to ask you where we fall. Honestly.
We're not in the top 10. No European country is in the top 10. No U.S. U.S. obviously isn't there either.
Yeah. Is Canada? How about Canada? How are we doing?
No.
Okay.
No.
See, North America, come on now. Oh, goodness.
Yeah. The next thing that I found is a new phrase that I'd never heard before called emotional sustainability.
Really? Emotional sustainability.
Yeah. And I thought when I read that, what the heck does that mean?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And there was another rabbit hole. I had to really dive into that. And I thought, how does that relate? Because, and I'm going to get to this pollution solution. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it in terms of the sustainability piece, and some of it's semi-obvious, but emotional sustainability. And I'm thinking, what is this? And it was fascinating as I started reading different pieces around this. But there is this thing that we've seen in the last few years about pledging to eliminate single-use plastics, pledging to not use straws anymore. It's the reactive piece of sustainability. You see a picture of a turtle with a straw in its nose, which is awful, right? And all of a sudden, we're going to eliminate straws everywhere. Not that these are not important things, because single-use plastics is a huge problem.
Yeah.
If you look at, you can look on the internet and see these photographs of these miles wide plastic, I don't even know what you would call them, but the mounds of plastic in the ocean.
Yeah, it's where it all converges for whatever reason, right? It's like a vortex of plastic crap.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it just churns and churns and churns, and it breaks up into microplastics, and the fish eat it, and then we eat it.
Yes.
Yeah, the amount of plastic that we actually put in our bodies is probably some insane amount, right? So this becomes this emotional sustainability piece. So we become passionate about a thing, and it just happens for us, and then we become suddenly sustainable or even more passionate about it. So, and then it turns into this all or nothing, which it doesn't have to be. It would be great if we all became 100% sustainable, but honestly, it's impossible for everybody to do it 100%. If we can do it 5% this month and a little 6% the next month, then whatever it takes to move in that direction is wonderful. But this notion of corporate sustainability isn't new, particularly for these global multinational companies. It's evolved, it's gained steam, and it will happen the same for us individually. I really like this other quote from a woman named Crystal Barnes, who's a senior VP of Global Responsibility and Sustainability. It doesn't actually say what company she was at. But she talks about hero brands. And again, that comes into our emotional sustainability piece. She's talking about the growing boldness of marketing messages, which really play into our emotional piece, and the commitment that brands are willing to take to play on our emotional sustainability. So they're taking a stance on social and political issues and making commitments. They are really making true commitments to eliminate waste, but they're making this extreme play on what she says is at the extreme end. We're seeing brands being personified, being referenced as brave brands or hero brands, which pushes at our emotions. And I think it was 2015 when I think 22% of Super Bowl commercials were sustainable related, which is interesting because we're talking Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And that has just increased over the last 4 years.
Did she give any examples?
Not in this particular quote, and I didn't go back and look to see what the Super Bowl commercials were.
Or just brands. I was thinking brands or products, but interesting. Huh?
No, but I think we could easily look and see, especially if I went back and looked at the Super Bowl commercials, which I might do. You know
There
me.
you go.
I know you will.
Yeah. Hello, YouTube.
Yes. Yeah. And then the continuing on this survey, this was a pretty big survey. 73% of consumers say they would definitely change their consumption habits to reduce their environmental impact. 73%. And there's 4 factors that they would look at, that the study looked at: their ability to spend, the convenience, the awareness, and the price. And when we talk about price, I'm not talking about low price. They're willing to spend, almost 50% of them, more to buy a product because it is more sustainable.
And that's great news, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's what we're looking for.
Yep.
I like that.
I do too. So what is this pollution solution, and where's the connection between consumer dynamics, climate change, course correction? What is all of this? How does this all come together? Consumers in big markets and small markets are really increasingly challenged by being environmentally conscious and how they exercise their power, their voice, the products they buy. This shift, I think, feels really urgent to a lot of people. There's so much to think about in terms of, do we buy an electric car? How does that work? Is organic good? Is natural good? Is what's playing on our emotions versus what really makes a difference? Free range versus this thing, grass-fed. There's so many things that we have to look at. And how do we pay attention to all of this? 9 in 10 people around the world, this blows my mind, but 9 in 10 people around the world are currently breathing air that is highly polluted, according to who? I'm not asking you a question, but the World Health Organization. Pop quiz.
I don't know the answer to this one. I'm going to say
pop quiz, Eric. Pop quiz.
People that are a lot smarter than me. Is that the answer? I don't know.
But according to the World Health Organization, 9 in 10 people are breathing highly polluted air.
Again, I mean, I guess most of us here in the United States, I think, live such a sheltered life when it comes to that type of situation. Or talk about clean water, same thing. I go to the tap, I turn on my water. For most of the United States, you can just put a glass under it and drink it. Mm-hmm. And so we don't think about how many people in the world have to travel to get clean water, or they just, they have to do some sort of...
Unless you live in Flint, Michigan.
Well, that's true. I wasn't going to bring up Flint, but you did. So
yeah.
I'm sorry, Flint. This is not about you guys. But the same thing with air is that, and again, I'm, in the Midwest, and it's not densely populated, so maybe that's one of the reasons. You're in a beautiful state with a city that really takes environmental sustainability and just the environment serious. And so you guys have made huge strides there. But man, 9 out of 10, that's terrible.
But we also live in fire country all around us. And that will cause a lot of air quality issues. And that is environmentally caused. Drought seasons will cause a lot of fires. Mm-hmm. And that is a lot of it's due to climate change. Here's another really sad statistic based on that, but there's over 4 million deaths a year related to air pollution. People in emerging countries from Southeast Asia to the Eastern Mediterranean regions are the ones who are bearing the brunt of this impact. And that's just talking about air. We're not even talking about water.
Yeah.
And the diseases from polluted water. So, yeah, it's a similar story. And then industrial agriculture, single-use plastics are big pollution problems, which we talked about briefly. Who pays this cost? Who ultimately pays if we don't change? It's the consumer. So, yeah, we have to think about all of these things. And corporate responsibility and sustainability strategies all take different shapes around the world. We talked about the emerging markets piece, U.S., Europe, different strategies, different concepts on how that works. One thing's really clear. Consumers are using their spending power to affect change, the change they want to see all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a trend. Companies cannot sidestep this anymore. Whether they're using our emotions to do what they think is going to make them a buck, it's really not a trend because consumers really are driving this. Even if corporations think they might be, consumers are. Sooner or later, whether it's government regulation, force of nature, public outcry, companies are going to respond in a more, I think, purposeful way. And governments have to respond. They need to respond if they haven't already. Even this government, who's pulled back a lot of regulations, they're going to need to do it. It's really personal. It's personal for us. It's personal for folks who live in these emerging markets. And there's this, I'm going to narrow this down to a threefold action plan of what's happening: consumer demand, corporate response and involvement, and government action. So, to sum it all up, we've discussed the consumer dynamics and how that results in the pollution solution.
All right. I'm not letting you off the hook that easy. You ready? You thought we were done. We're not done. I'm going to pose a question to you because this has now been on my mind ever since you talked about the turtles with a straw in his nose. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and actually I've seen that picture and it's horrifying. So we're going to take straws, for instance, because here is my question for all of us, I guess, but you're the expert here. So we say plastic straws are bad. We can all agree with that. Plastic straws are bad. The amount of plastic straws that get thrown into the wind and end up in the water one way or another is terrible. So then we change to paper straws. Now, how much, and paper bags, right? At the store, we're using more paper bags than plastic bags. Now we're talking more paper products need to be created. Therefore, we're cutting down more trees. Now we know that there are action plans for sustainability when it comes to trees and how many they plant compared to how many they harvest, so on and so forth. Or you can do what my wife and I do, and that's we have both rubber straws and metal straws, right, that are reusable and washable, so on and so forth. But then I was thinking, well, that's one step, because when we try, if we know we're going to be going and grabbing some fast food, we'll have them with us. My wife actually keeps a couple in her purse. And we'll just not use their straws. Whether they're paper or they're plastic, we say, we don't need any straws. But now I was thinking about those rubber straws. I don't know where those were made. So if those are made in China or anywhere else, then there's a cost of that production. I don't know what the company's doing, if they're environmentally friendly, but then they have to ship them here, which again uses fuel, and there's this big circle, Kim. And how do we know, how we can make that difference on all these different levels? Because that scenario fits all three of those things, right? We've got the government stepping in saying, hey, we need to reduce this. We have corporations that need to be held accountable to the products, the rubber that they're using for those straws, how they're doing it, how they're creating that, the pollution that's created by the corporation. And then, ultimately the consumer has to be responsible, and the product sustainability. So just that one situation. What are your thoughts? How do we make sure that we're doing the right thing? Because I don't want to hear in 5 years that I'm part of the problem because I've been using paper straws. Right? We cut down too many trees because Eric uses way too many paper straws.
Right. If you don't need a straw, don't use it at all.
Okay, that's easy. Come on now.
Yeah. My wife says, adults don't need straws.
True, unless other adults in the car drive like my wife.
Right.
You have to have a lid on, and then you have to have a straw to drink. Sorry. Okay, I'm not going to let her listen to this podcast.
I get it. Some people like to use a straw. So if you really need one, don't use a paper or plastic one. Have a silicone straw. It's, I think, in the long run, better than over your lifetime using 1,000 plastic straws that will never break down or more. But you're right. there is a cost for production, there's a cost for shipping. All of those things play into the factors here. And I think we have to balance all of that. Because again, when I tell clients about investing, there's no perfect company. There's no perfect solution. There's a better solution, but there's no perfect solution. And we also have to think about the jobs that we might take away.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can provide another job, there's also that. I did read somewhere in my research for this podcast that when widespread bag bans, plastic bag bans went into effect in this country, there was a city in India that shut down hundreds of plastic bag manufacturing plants. That's a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
Which made me feel terrible. But then also I have to think about the environment too. So we have to think, where can we shift those jobs? So there has to be a balance.
That's a lot to think of. Again, I'd never heard that before. So you can't just necessarily keep jobs to continue producing something that we know is harmful.
Right.
But there's, and again, we can't regulate other countries necessarily, but it'd be nice to know that India took it seriously and said, okay, if we're going to be shutting this down, what can we do to make sure these families are taken care of, or we transition to something else.
A better quality product, a different type of product. Absolutely, yeah.
A lot to think about, Kim. Always,
Absolutely.
Every podcast. You give me so much to think about.
I hope I can provide something for someone to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you, Kim, so much for your time today. This was a fantastic podcast. And again, every listener out there, as you're learning along with me, it's going to bring up questions.
And me.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you're doing the research, so you're learning and then just bringing this great information. But as our listeners are listening and saying, okay, obviously she's doing a lot of research. We know that she is passionate about this and doing this within the investing world. They want to reach out and talk to you about it. How do they get a hold of you?
They can reach us in a couple different ways. Call us on the phone, 505-982-9661, if they still call people on the phone. By email, info@horizonssfs.com. They can also find us on the website at horizonssfs.com.
Perfect. Again, Kim, thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking to you.
It's great to chat with you and talk about these interesting subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in and joining us and listening to the Deep Impact Investing Podcast with Kimberly Griego-Kiel. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Kim comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Horizon Sustainable Financial Services, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Deep Impact Investing Podcast, the sustainable, responsible impact investing podcast that shows you how to get your voice heard. It's time to start investing like you give a damn. To ask a question that we can answer on an upcoming podcast, email us at info@horizonssfs.com or join the conversation on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Horizons Sustainable Financial Services, or give us a call at 505-982-9661. Don't forget to click the subscribe button to be notified when new episodes become available. The companies we may speak about during our podcast are not recommendations for investment only. You and your financial advisor can determine what the right investments are for you and your situation. Horizon Sustainable Financial Services is a registered investment advisor, registered with the state of New Mexico, and other jurisdictions were registered or exempted. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the host and/or guest and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.